But nonetheless, welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA. We're right here on the Scotty Talks NBA YouTube channel as well as the DSM Media YouTube channel. Still iron out some kinks with the new YouTube channel and the new intro, so bear with me there, guys. But nonetheless, I want to welcome a very special guest to the channel, to the show, Austin Krell. You guys may know him on Twitter at NBA Krell. If you don't know by now, Austin Krell has gotten a new gig as a Sixers insider with 97.3 FM ESPN. You see it down there underneath of his name. First, want to start the show, Austin. Once again, I know I congratulated you behind the scenes. Wanted to congratulate you on air for the new position. I view a lot of your work, right? And I see a lot of the hard work you do. A lot of my shows and a lot of the information I get from my shows comes from the work that you do. So congrats once again. And welcome to the show, Austin.
No problem. Thank you for having me. And I'm glad that my work can be of service to you. So in all seriousness, that is what I strive for. So if people are using it, that I know I'm doing something right there.
Awesome. Because got to give you credit where it is due, my man. So thank you for that, and welcome to the show once again. Let's dive right into it because there's a lot going on in the NBA, a lot of rumors coming out about the 76ers. I want to dig into all of that, but I want to start with the most popular story, I would say, right now. The Bradley Beal trade, right? Bradley Beal getting traded to Phoenix for Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, monton of second-round picks and a few pick swaps. What are your instant thoughts to this trade? How does this change the NBA dynamics, if it changes them at all when it comes to that type of situation with the no trade clause? What are your thoughts on this trade?
I kind of just think this is an opportunity. The Suns are taking this new CBA as an opportunity to zig while everybody else zags. Like people are trying to cut down on big deals and salaries because they know that the new CBA, after you hit that second apron, is going to be very punitive. So team is trying to figure out how do we break up these lesser impact big salaries into multiple role players so we can concentrate on building depth instead of just being star heavy. And the Suns kind of said, screw that, we're just going to go the star route while everyone else is doing what they're doing, and we're going to make a big three, or in this case a big four, I guess. It's nice in theory. I don't like the fit really at all in Phoenix. I mean, I'm sure it'll ultimately pan out and work because star trades just, when they usually are just potent and they don't usually have the bust. The downside usually doesn't hit when you have these kind of trades, unless it's the Brooklyn Nets, but that was obviously extenuating circumstances that were outside of basketball. I tend not to think it's a great fit, but more importantly, like they have 160 something million tied up in four guys, and cap for this year, according to Shams Charania, who just reported this today, the final figure is going to be 136. So they are well over the cap
with four players.
With four players, so that means the rest of their roster is going to be veteran minimums, like that. And that's a very dicey path to travel down. I mean, I'm guessing you'll have some more down the line in their career guys that are in their mid-30s who are willing to take a veteran minimum to come play for a team that has a chance at the title. But by and large, like this depth is going to be minimal. And then, I mean, when they get deeper into the playoffs, you're going to be taxing your older player, your stars more. My guess, without knowing anything for sure, my guess is that they're probably going to turn Ayton into three different, two or three role players, just to enforce that second unit. But I think there's also some precautionary, thoughts to have where, like, the whole reason that Ayton looked so expendable was that Chris Paul made, Bismack Biyombo and John Landau and their other centers look better than they were. So, Ayton is going to have some skills that maybe another guard can't bring out of those other backup bigs. So I do think this is a fairly significant risk to take for a guy who's who is just about to, I think, just turned 30 this week and is going to be averaging $50 million in salary per year, has a no trade clause that carries with him to Phoenix. So he's going to have say on wherever he goes next if they do intend, if they do decide to pull the plug. And his game has regressed. His shooting has regressed. His catch and shoot 3-point shooting has been pretty stable, but he's been more of a pull up guy in his last couple of years. So I think there is a chance that stabilizes, but they're going to be a mid range heavy team because that's what Kevin Durant and Beal and Booker are. I don't know who the point guard is there, and I don't think like are you going to try to sell yourselves on Devin Booker and Bradley Beal are going to be our lead decision makers and ball handlers, and maybe it works, but I just don't see the seamless fit. I mean, if you asked me where I would have thought Bradley Beal made the most sense, it's in Milwaukee. There are there's a defensive line there that fills in his Beal's weaknesses, or I should say aptitude on defense. So or I guess apathy is the right word, I should say, apathy on defense. So, you have guys in Milwaukee who can cover that up. You have you have a point guard there in Drew Holiday already. If they were to pivot from Chris Middleton to that would have been a really good move. Really good move. And they'll probably just have to score everybody, but if it doesn't work, I'm not surprised by it.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you regarding just the strict analysis. Of course, like when you have that much talent on one team, you always have a chance, right? Like they're going to be a contender per se, but when you think about the health history of all three of those guys, actually in recent years, it's definitely a huge risk. I would agree with you there. What about on the Wizards side? There's been mixed reviews about what the Wizards received in this, given Bradley Beal's contract, given the no trade clause. Did you think the Wizards took a terrible deal? Was this a good deal? Was this all that they could have expected? What do you think there?
They took the only deal they could take.
Yeah.
He had a no trade clause, a full no trade clause. He basically got to pick the deal himself. That's how that works.
Yeah. Is he the last guy with a no trade clause in the NBA? Like, is there any, would you know?
I think he's the only guy right now who has one.
And they're not going to give those out again.
Yeah. I will tell you, I think the owner, Ted Leonsis, has signed off on him getting a max, or he granted him no trade clause.
Yeah.
So, that was the owner. I think there's going to be some blame cast on Tommy Shepard, the former GM there, because they didn't do the deal until now. And I think that there is some fair point there, but I also think it's also, it's fair to say that the owner, who is ultimately the one that, has to sign off on all these things. And if the owner is saying, don't trade him, owner has some blame in the fact that this is all you're getting back. But at the end of the day, it's the GM's job to convince the owner that this is the best move for the team going forward. And Tommy Shepard was not able to do that previously. Michael Winger comes in there and has, and maybe there was already some writing on the wall and Ted Leonsis had given up and realized that it just wasn't going to happen. But this was a terrible deal that they really didn't have any choice but to make, because they're going nowhere. They've been going nowhere for years. So, it was better to not waste any more time and just cut it.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. It just may have been a year or even 2 years too late, to your point there. Keeping it on track, keeping on the same page, thinking about the Washington Wizards. Obviously, they're in the news again today, talking about trading Kristaps Porzingis to the Boston Celtics. Malcolm Brogdon ultimately goes part of a 3-team deal with the LA Clippers to the Clippers. And then the Washington Wizards get a first rounder and Marcus Morris back, I believe.
I think it's the 30th overall pick, so it's some will call it a fake first rounder. I don't know. I don't know where the
super early second rounder
real. So it's just a first round pick. Like, that's what it is. And like I was thinking about it. I tweeted this out. Like, they got one first round pick for Kristaps, more than what they got for Bradley Beal. Pathetic.
It's pathetic, and that's crazy. I want to ask you about the fit, though. What is Boston? What are the Boston Celtics looking for here when they're trying to add a guy like Kristaps Porzingis and ultimately trading a guy like Malcolm Brogdon that was a sixth man of the year last year?
I don't like that fit either. Like, I really don't. I think it's an upgrade in talent. Obviously, Porzingis is a very talented player, and he's big. He can shoot over guys. It's clearly an upgrade in talent. And but just because you upgrade your talent does not mean that you are making yourself a better, more rounded basketball team. I think this deal beats around the bush for their main issue, which was in the playoffs. And you could say, yeah, they forced Game 7 in the conference finals. The reason they got down 3-0 was because they couldn't close out in the fourth quarter of games 1 and 2. So
turnovers,
and the reason that they didn't win Game 4 in Philadelphia, or that they lost Game 1 against Philadelphia, was poor execution in crunch time. Yeah. So I they don't have a point guard. The point guard that they had, who I thought was their best, de facto point guard, was Malcolm Brogdon. They just traded him away to LA. Marcus Smart is not a point guard. He's a shooting guard.
Yeah.
And Jason Tatum is not a credible ball handler. I don't care how many points per game he averages. If I'm watching a guy have Cody Zeller on a switch and he's taking a sidestep three instead of making, instead of finding an angle to the basket and getting into the paint and drawing other defenders and kicking, that's not a credible ball handler to me. You're making bad decisions. They've needed something the last 2 years. The reason that they lost the championship to the Golden State Warriors, the reason that they got down 3-0 and into the Celtics, or to the Miami Heat, was that they don't have anybody who is in the guard, in the guard mold, who can say, no, you belong over here. I want you to lift up over here and get this spot. I'm going to enter the ball here. I want you to set a screen down here and go around there. There's no one on that team that knows how to set up an offense. So it's just going to be resorting to Jaylen Brown isolating or taking a three, or Jason Tatum taking a switch and taking a terrible shot. There's a reason he shoots, there's a reason his efficiency drops, because he takes some awful shots.
Yeah. No, I think you make great points. It's interesting thinking about it that way, because I agree with you. I think back to the series against the Sixers, and it didn't seem like they had an issue in the paint, right? Like, it didn't seem like they had an issue guarding Embiid. It didn't seem like they had an issue rebounding the ball. So, like, I guess I just don't understand. Like, Kristaps Porzingis, he's a good player. He had a great season last year on the Wizards. Very low key, by the way, until I looked at the numbers recently. But like, what does he bring to them that they were missing? And maybe that's what you were just speaking on. It's not really anything that they were missing. I don't know. What is that fit?
I don't think it's about anything that they're missing. I think this was just a jump on a star level player.
Yeah.
Who adds some shooting, who can be a pick and pop guy in a way that Horford could not. And that's great. In theory, that's great. Except who's the ball handler in that pick and roll? Is it Jason Tatum? Okay, then are you trusting him to make the right pass every time? Because I'm not. He hasn't proven to be a phenomenal, passer and a phenomenal decision maker. That's the whole. I mean, they got more talented, sure, on paper. I just you're beating around the bush of your main problem, and it's. And it isn't to double down on talent. It's that you need a legitimate point guard, and they just don't have that. And the only salary that was one of their best movable salaries was Malcolm Brogdon. They just traded him away to DC or to LA to get the
It's really an interesting thought. Is there any way that the Wizards? I don't know if this deal is completely finalized. I know the Suns and the Wizards deal can't be finalized until after the draft, I believe. Is there any way that Chris Paul gets slipped to the Boston Celtics? Like, is that even possible in this deal, or is the Porzingis $36 million, is that already kind of approaching too much for the Boston Celtics to add?
So I think like the connection from Chris Paul to Boston now is it's a natural connection to make, because he's on the Wizards. Ostensibly, he won't want to be there because they're not a contender.
Right.
He'll want to be on a team that has a chance. Boston has a chance. They need a point guard now. Makes sense. Number one, I'm not looking at their salary sheet at the moment, so I don't know where they stand in terms of having
Yeah,
mid-level exceptions. But if they can only offer him a veteran minimum, and you have a team out west who says we can give you the full MLE, okay, that's 3 times as much, 4 times as much money
yeah,
to go play for them. On top of
very
that,
true.
he wants to be out west with his family. His family is all out west. The Clippers appeared to be interested, and now they just traded for Malcolm Brogdon, so
Right.
that's off the table now. I guess maybe the Lakers are more motivated to make a deal for him because that means that they don't have to pay D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah.
So maybe that's in play. I think I wouldn't rule anything out, but I just don't. I don't think that Boston checks off the boxes
Yeah.
that Chris Paul wants. And I think there are teams that exist that do check all the boxes off.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I had to ask, like you said, the connections are there. Had to ask. Marshawn Lynch asks, Porzingis is going to make 36 million. Yeah, he's going to opt in for this trade to happen into the
And an
36
extension,
million
and an extension, and they're
and an
going to
extension.
want to. And by all accounts, they want to pay Jaylen Brown. It's going to be like, I think, the supermax, so it's going to be like 295 million, I think. So they're going to be on the hook. Their entire core is going to be Porzingis, Tatum, and Brown, and I, I think that's a really scary investment to make.
That is very fair to say the least. When you lay it out like that, I know I was looking at it at first. I was like, well, how did Boston get this done? And then you think about it, and then you just elaborated on it and described it perfectly. It's a very weird situation, and you're right. It's a wonder to think about who's going to run that offense ultimately. Um,
I think the best way to look at it is like teams cannot afford to have their own version of the Tobias Harris contract anymore. You can't afford to have
yeah,
a guy who just isn't worth that money. And I mean, Jaylen Brown is obviously a lot better than Tobias Harris, but is he worth the 300 million or about that his next deal would be for? And if you don't think he is, if you think his flaws are too limiting and restrictive to what you need to do to win a title, then I don't. I think like you're in a very significant pickle here. Now, I think teams would want Jaylen Brown more than they want Tobias Harris. I
yeah,
think teams would envision that they have a better fit for him. But still, what if he gets injured? What if
yeah,
there's this or there's that? I think it's a lot less scary if you don't make this deal for Porzingis because he's going to want to raise, and he's already making 36 million.
yeah.
I just think that this is the
It's
time where
crazy.
your core has to be very sensible, and if it's not, and you're committing big money to them, you could have a big problem.
Yeah, it's crazy thinking that Kristaps could get more than that, but that is the NBA that we are, the NBA era that we are in, nonetheless. I want to ask you very quickly all the rumors with Paul George, Damian Lillard. You can even throw Kawhi in there. The Clippers are looking at arranging things or gouging things, whatever the case may be. Um, the reason I bring that up is there any possible scenario where the Sixers would consider trading Tyrese Maxey? It was reported earlier in the offseason that he was not untouchable, but that they believe he will turn into an all-star caliber player and that they're really not looking to move him. Do you think that that's a possibility at all? I know you're not somebody that can look into the future and predict things like that, but just based off what you've heard around the team.
The messaging has been consistent pretty much since the moment they were eliminated from the playoffs. It was, Tyrese is a part of our core, and we believe that he'll be an all-star. And I think that they're going to stand by that. They're going to extend him, and they're going to live with that. I think Tyrese is an awesome young player, and I do think he's you know underrated to the point where people were like, "Well, how can we include him in a deal?" And my whole stance is like, let the kid grow.
Yeah,
Let him have a chance to have the ball in his hand a little more, and go to work. I mean, we're underrating criminally a 20-point per game scorer
yeah,
on insane efficiency. Like, he's small, he has defensive issues. Okay, uh, at least he tries on defense. Like,
yeah,
trying is more than half the battle, and if you can learn some of the tricks of the trade and pressure the ball more,
yeah.
then you can become like maybe not a net neutral, but closer to a net neutral than you are. So I think people need to pump the brakes on the whole trade Tyrese thing, because I do think there is a way for for him to be an all-star, and I don't think he's that far off either. So I don't think that I think that they genuinely believe, yeah, he is the type of guy who's going to be part of our core, attitude wise, culture wise. They love him. He's the guy that brings sunshine on a cloudy day.
Yeah. No, that's exactly how I view Tyrese Maxey. So I'm happy to hear you say that. Is there any rush to getting that extension done for him? Any reason to make sure you get that done this offseason versus next offseason?
Well, I think there's always that you don't want to, make a young guy wait that much, because like he thinks like you're going to give me the max. What's the point of waiting? Just sign it.
Just give me it.
Yeah, because the more you let it wait and sit, the more it communicates this idea like we're not 100% sure we believe in you.
Fair.
And with Rich Paul as his agent, I'm sure that's going to be something that they they want to get done. And if they don't get it done and he goes in the next offseason, that makes him a restricted free agent. Someone could offer him a lot of money, and the Sixers would probably sign the offer sheet anyway. But I think it's just best to get it out of the way and get it done.
Yeah. Not have all that drama and messiness.
And that doesn't mean that they wouldn't trade him. Like I think if we're giving the Sixers truth serum, they would say like, yeah, we have a star that really available that really fits what we're trying to do here, like a big wing. Then we'd obviously have to consider it and maybe even pull the trigger. But I don't think that they're foaming at the mouth. They're trying to get off Tyrese Maxey right now.
Yeah, makes sense. And once again, when do big wings, good wings, healthy wings become available in the NBA? It doesn't happen unless there's risk that comes with that. I want to switch gears a little bit here and focus on what is actually the pieces that are actually on the Sixers and within the Sixers organization right now. The Nick Nurse hire. I wanted to get your thoughts here. I know you've written a few articles on this. And I actually had the pleasure of reading one of them ultimately about some of the concepts that he will implement. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to speak kind of more openly on what you're expecting Nick Nurse to bring to this organization.
It's funny. One of the first thoughts I had when I was watching the Raptors film and then contrasting it to Sixers film, I was like, oh my God, they could have reasonably fired Doc after they lost Game 6. Because just the way that they executed in that fourth quarter was abhorrent. Like there was no structure, there was no system in place. It was just, we're gonna go 2-man game, and then we're gonna switch these spots, and then we're gonna see if we can get this going over here. There was no movement, there's no second side stuff. And then here Nick Nurse is like, oh, we're just gonna plug in a decoy play here. We're gonna have you slide up high. We're gonna have you come over here and do this and do that and screen this way and that way. Like there's Nick Nurse has so much activity going on at all times, and he's just making you think and move. It's so much better to watch, and it's more conducive to points. And those Raptors teams that were post Kawhi, they were quite frankly dreadful on offense. They missed tons of open shots. They made some bad decisions. They had guys who were playing outside of their roles, and yet they were, they were at least a little bit problematic for some teams. And so I think Nick Nurse is very tactically oriented. If he sees a weakness, he's going to pick on it. Like in Game 2 against the Raptors in the 2019 series, when Joel has gastroenteritis and he has the knee injury that plagued him for most of the second half of the season. It was, Joel was listed as questionable before that game, and then he plays. And then what does Nick Nurse do the first 3 possessions? Gets him in a pick and roll. And then he gets him in space against Siakam and makes him guard. And then he says, "Well, we know they want to drop. Let's just run a pick and pop for Gasol and get him an open 3." They went at Joel 3 times in a row to test him to see, okay, how are you feeling? Let's see if we can get you to move and see if you're comfortable moving. If there's a weakness, he's going to pick at it. There's a size mismatch, he's going to go at it. If it doesn't yield you the first look there, that's fine. They're hoping that'll draw a help rotation, and suddenly you have a cutter or somebody else open elsewhere on the floor. He's very good with the second side action. As I said, they like to run floppy and pin downs to get shooters open looks. They run DHOs at the wazoo. Those Raptors teams had a lot of different interesting stuff that they did that the Sixers simply didn't. You felt like the Sixers didn't have as much in the final year of Doc's tenure. And then beyond that, on defense, they pressure the ball a ton. They switch up their schemes a ton. If they feel they have a chance to win a game in the fourth quarter, you're not going to see the same scheme twice in a row, and they're gonna slide their zone into different alignments within the same possession. They try a bunch of different stuff, and that's what Nick Nurse does. My first impression of him is he's very charming individual. He exudes this confidence of like we're gonna I know how to do this. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna show you how we're gonna do this. We're gonna do some of the things that you like, but we're also gonna do some of the things that I like too. And I'm very intrigued to see how this works, especially if Harden is back.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because as I'm listening to everything you're saying there, thinking about Nick Nurse, some of the concepts he comes into this organization with, the culture that seems to have been set in Toronto. When you're looking at James Harden, there's been a lot of smoke, obviously, this offseason about him going back to Houston. Now seems like it's leaning back towards Philadelphia of late. If and when James Harden does come back, how do you see him fitting into a Nick Nurse style of offense? And before you answer that, let me ask you this. Am I thinking way too naively to think that Nick Nurse won't adjust his offense to James Harden and players like Joel Embiid as well?
I think it's going to be three individuals really, who've had success at this level, who have accomplished the feats in their own rights at this level. I think Joel is probably a little bit more open to coaching the first time around. And I think James is probably, I don't know this for a fact, but
Yeah.
My sense just, with the information that is out there and, the rumors and, the interacting with him, I think there are times when James thinks that there's a better way to do things
Yeah.
that the coach does, which is fine and fair and might be true. Um, I would expect that they're going to ask both parties, Nick Nurse and James, to be more willing to meet in the middle,
Yeah.
and do some push and some pull. And I do think that the unknown and the uncertainty of how that relationship could play out, it incentivizes both the Sixers and James Harden to say, we'll do another 1+1 deal. And
Yeah.
if you want out in a year, okay, that's fine. We're not going to fire Nick again. We just fired Doc, so we're not going to fire Coach again. If you want to leave, we can leave. If they do it more lengthy deal, then I think there are risks down the line that will present themselves, and there's clash of styles and whatnot. But I do think that there is something to hey, Nick Nurse has the cachet of he's won a championship in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Doc won a championship like 3 or 4 presidencies ago. So, I think there's an element of this guy, this older individual who has not won a title. Why am I listening to him? The league has changed 6 times over since then. So I do think it's fascinating to see how that dynamic works. To say I don't have to say I'm without concern would be dishonest, though. I do think there are reasons to be concerned, but winning cures all. So if they're lapping the field and they're killing everybody, it'll pan out. And then playoffs is when it'll prove it, though.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when you say the 1+1 deal, that sticks out to me because that would be ideal from my perspective of what I would like to see the Sixers do with James Harden. Ultimately, if they are bringing him back, my question to you: there's a lot of talk about if the Sixers would be better off after James Harden. First part of this question: if you were the Sixers, is there a fine line on what you would bring James Harden back on? Or is it just as simple as you have to bring him back? It keeps Embiid's championship window open. And then along those same lines, how does a Harden deal affect what the Sixers are able to do in free agency if he signs back or if he doesn't sign back. And does it really change it at all, if any?
Right. So I think if I'm the Sixers, I'm probably going to write on this in a couple of days because it's going to be a hot topic soon anyway. This should be viewed not in the vacuum of do you bring James Harden back or not.
Right.
This should be viewed as the opportunity cost of not bringing James Harden back, and what that means in terms of the other options out there. If you're looking at Fred VanVleet, are you really going to tell me that you want the lower ceiling but lesser downside of Fred VanVleet over what Harden can give you on his best day? Like I just don't buy that. Like that 17-7 is going to be like a huge game changing thing for your offense, especially when James just had the best point guard season in franchise history. He did, statistically wise. So I do think that it is the best thing for the franchise because the alternatives just aren't good. Like,
there's nobody to replace him.
Yeah, like, are you like Kyrie Irving? Is that what your answer is? Is Fred VanVleet your answer? Unless you have Steph Curry out there who's going to say trade me to Philly, then I don't see what the better alternative is. I think the better conversation for people to have is, was the Sacramento Kings offer of either De'Aaron Fox or Tyrese Halliburton on the table, and would either of those trades have been better because they're younger players and they're on more long-term contracts, so you don't have to worry about this right now. But that's the past now,
right? Hindsight.
I think the only correct answer really in this free agency class is to bring James back. I don't think it's close. Now, in terms of the right contract and what it does for their free agency, the salary cap is announced today. It's $2 million above projection. So the Sixers are now only about $21 million over the cap, which is great. And then so the apron line, the tax line went up a little bit, so that should help a little bit. I think they save a little bit of money that could help them towards free agency with Montrez declining his option. And Joel makes a little bit more money now because the cap is higher. But keeping James and assuming I think the max they can give him is like 48 million. And don't quote me for sure, but I think just because that's roughly the math on this. You're looking at a scenario where they're adding like 13 million on their books more. So that means that you're looking at without doing the math exactly, I would say roughly around 170 million in total salary, and that means that you're I think still below the apron, but not by much. You have room for a mid-level.
Okay,
but that's just my very rough brain math.
Yeah.
At 6 o'clock tonight,
don't write that in stone.
Yeah. I could be off by 100 million. Who knows? But, but I do think like they're going to have some chances to make some moves this offseason. I think re-signing James inevitably makes it harder to do some things just because it all depends on what your goal is in terms of where do we want to be relative to that apron. And you always want to give yourself a little bit of buffer or room below that. And I think this brings you closer to that apron for sure.
Gotcha. And it makes a ton of sense how you broke it down there. So maximum, like the highest hope that we can hope for regardless is a mid-level exception, that type of deal, to be available to the Sixers. And then of course, vet minimums from there.
When you look at it further, it's like, okay, you have George Niang, you have Jalen McDaniels, you have Paul Reed, you have Shake Milton. The reporting suggests that Shake Milton will be gone. So you're looking at, trying to split an MLE up amongst three guys, which is hard in its own right. Now, I do think they have bird rights there in some way, so that should help some extent. But bottom line is you're going to have that second apron looming, and that's something that teams want to stay away from.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Do you think you don't have to get specific with names regarding the free agents that the Sixers are hosting? Just as far as the ones they can re-sign, excuse me. So they're free agents. Is there, in your head, does it feel like you can only get 2 of those guys back? That's what it seems like. It seems like Niang and Paul Reed, at least from the Michael KB report, they're at the forefront of priorities, and then maybe McDaniel's a step below that. I would personally like to bring McDaniels back, but in your mind, is it only you're probably only going to be able to bring 2 of those 4 guys back in reality?
I think there would be an effort made to get 3 of the 4 back at least.
Yeah.
I think the Sixers just logically would be satisfied if they can bring 2 of those 4 back.
Yeah.
I think Jalen and Paul Reed are very much Nick Nurse type of players.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Niang is one of your best shooters, and so that would make sense if you want to. That would make sense that if you want to keep that spacing and that continuity, to bring him back too. There's going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe say we're going to try to cut off some salary in a Tobias Harris deal. But the thing is this: when you're over the cap, it really doesn't matter how much salary you're cutting, because if you're only cutting 15 million and you're still 5 million over the cap, guess what? You can't just. It isn't like you can just go ahead and sign new guys. Like you're still,
right.
you still only have your exceptions available. So I do think there is some finagling.
Gotcha. Final question for you, Austin, because I know we went plenty over time here, and my apologies for that. But there's a lot of talk about the Sixers trying to buy a second-round pick for the NBA draft tomorrow night. What is the importance of a second-round pick, them making this effort, trying to go out and grab a guy in the second round? How important is that for a franchise that's in the situation that the Sixers are in right now?
So I think many teams around the NBA are asking themselves, like, are the Miami Heat just doing something crazy like that? Like, are we missing the plot with the Miami Heat? Are they like they have Gabe Vincent here, they have Caleb Martin here, they have Max Strus and Duncan Robinson, and this guy and that guy, and so are we missing and mispriority and not giving enough priority to the UDFA pool in the second round of the draft?
Yeah.
And I think teams are thinking, like, with this new CBA and with the fact that an 8 seed just got to the finals, with a lot of guys who are not by any stretch of the imagination, high draft picks or even draft picks at all.
Right.
I think it's like how can we get a cheap, young, raw player in here who is not going to be guaranteed, a ton of money over a number of years? A guy who is young and is hungry because he didn't get drafted at a high level, and can we milk some upside out of a guy and get a high level role player in the second round? I think that's the whole allure, not just for the Sixers. I think every team is thinking
every team with the new CBA.
How can we be more like the Miami Heat in some ways?
Makes sense once again, and that is a trend to keep an eye on going forward. When you're talking about the second round picks, undrafted free agents. So, Austin, that is all I have for you. I know, once again, I apologize for going over the time here. Let me get you out of here for the Phillies game. I know you're a Phillies fan, so let me get you out of here. They taking on the Braves tonight. That's a pretty big game, and it looks like it actually just started. So, once again, Austin, thank you for coming on the show. Congratulations once again on the new position with 97.3 FM on ESPN. Sixers insider Austin Krell. Be sure to give him a follow at NBA Krell. Thank you once again, Austin. Have a great rest of your night, man.
No problem, Scotty. Thanks for having me anytime.
Thanks, Austin. Peace. All right, guys. So, yes, thank you once again to Austin for joining us. That was a ton of information. I'm going to go ahead and take some time to process that. But nonetheless, awesome guests that I will have on again very soon. Once we actually get some action from the Sixers, once they start making some decisions, we'll definitely get him on here again to break it all down for us. He's a guy that really goes in depth on a lot of these situations. So I can definitely appreciate that and definitely want to bring that to the viewers here. That's the point of this. But nonetheless, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the comments, all the engagement in the comments. Next time we have a guest, be sure, drop the questions in the comments here. Marshawn Lynch, I didn't get to this one. I was running out of time with Austin. I wanted to get to some Sixers topics. But ultimately, yeah, I love this question, and I wish I would have had time to ask him it. Do you think the Clippers still looking to trade Kawhi and PG after the Brogdon deal? Interesting thought there, because Brogdon gives them a piece to their team that they just simply did not have. And to Austin's point, it's a point guard, right? Somebody to organize their offense, right? And that's what Malcolm Brogdon can ultimately do. Makes the Clippers a lot better, but I think the way I would address this question personally myself, if you were looking to possibly move Kawhi or PG in the first place, I'm not sure that it's because of like the fit or what they bring to the team when they're on the court. I think the issue is the fact that neither of them are ever on the court consistently. So if that is ultimately your problem, maybe bringing Malcolm Brogdon in, who he's a guy who's also dealt with injuries, so I don't know if this is the best example. Bringing him in to take some of that load off of PG and off of Kawhi, maybe that gives them a vote of confidence to move forward with those guys. I think from my perspective, if I were the Clippers owner, the Clippers GM, I would think of it this way. I was looking to move Paul George or Kawhi. If they were open to Kawhi, I'd never heard that. But PG, we definitely heard that in the last day or so. If I'm open to moving him, it's because of his injury history. It's because of his availability. And getting Malcolm Brogdon isn't going to change that for me. So that's the way I would ultimately put that. But definitely, guys, be sure to bring your questions, comments to the next show. We'll have another kick-ass guest on here for sure. I'm going to keep on doing my scouting, keep on finding the best content creators, the best, the best analysts out here, reporters, whatever it may be. And I will continue to bring them to the channel here for you guys to witness. Nonetheless, guys, I want you to have a very great rest of your day there. Until next time, see you guys. Peace.